How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, we gonna go on round 2 on this. I wasn't plugged all the way in fully, but what I'm gonna present in my history, I was able to pull it all up. So, what I'm about to present to the royal family, y'all are not going to be happy about it at all. So, there's 2 people that you need to keep on your frontal lobe. First and foremost, Nita Lori, and McNear Jones. All right. So, we're going to start back with Nita. Now, we know that Congress, let's go over here real quick, holds the purse strings. We know this. And they're quite selective about how they issue out funds. And I have a bonus video. I ain't said that in a long time to present to the royal family that's going to make you piss to the core. All right? So, what I'm going to do first is I have something that I'm going to read here to the royal family. Congress passes legislation to expand $19 million on behalf of Israel. New York Congress member Nita Lori, chair of the Appropriations Committee, have been to Israel dozens of times. She said she chose her position in order to give money to Israel. So they vote her in, but she's devoted to Israel. While some Americans know that the U.S. gives Israel over $10 million per day, 7,000 per minute, they may be unaware that additional spending on behalf of Israel significantly increase to the cost to American taxpayers. Congress has just passed legislation to expand over $7.3 billion in 2011 on behalf of Israel. If signed, and it is already signed, I did my research, signed into law as expected, this will cost American taxpayers over $19 million per day. This comes in the midst of coronavirus hits to a fragile U.S. economy, despite Israel's long record of human rights violation, causing hostility against the U.S., Israel's actions, the U.S., and the fact that most Americans feel the U.S. give Israel too much money on the average of 7,000 times more per capita than to others around the world. Spending of Israel take 2 forms. We don't need to go to that. Let me go to that. I'm going to leave that right there. It's a quite long article. And let me see here. Is there anything else? So basically in this article, that which I'm going to pin, they're going to give a breakdown of what the military receive, the refugees over in Israel receive, and all, just it's quite disgusting, my royal family. Like I said, it's a very lengthy article, and I have a number of videos, and then a very lengthy video, but a very detailed video that I'm going to present to the royal family. So, let's close this. So, let's keep in mind that Nita Lori has been in that position since 1988. And in order to keep everything running smoothly, they needed a candidate that that they felt very comfortable with. Okay? He is gay. He's not a heterosexual male. And this is what they want around them because they feel like heterosexual males. They feel very intimidated. And so in order for him to get this position, he demonstrated something to the enemy that he's willing to go along with the program. So he is 100% totally compromised, totally going to fit in perfectly like a glove and just keep her legacy going, because her only ultimate goal was to make sure, keep that in your frontal lobe, that Israel receive our money. Ain't that ironic? We going amidst this coronavirus, people unemployment, and then they play games with us when it comes to our reparations. So we already know he ain't even thinking about reparations. All he worried about is keeping Massa happy when he on that plantation. So, let's just hear a little bit from him and her.
Congresswoman Nita Lowey on Thursday announced she will not seek re-election in 2020. Lowey, 82, was first elected to the House in 1988 and rose to become the most senior member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee. She said in a statement, quote, "After 31 years in the United States Congress representing the people of Westchester, Rockland, Queens, and the Bronx, I have decided not to seek re-election in 2020.
So let's also keep in mind that what she did was to make sure before she stepped out of office that was secured. She made sure that after being in office since 1988, this woman is 83 years old. Her ass should have been out of there 30 years ago. All right? So let's hear from this coon.
That Democratic congressional candidate, Mondaire Jones, joins me right now from South Nyack, New York. Thank you very much for your time. I want to start, I'm really interested in the makeup of your district and this moment, right? It's a blue district, where the expectations are you will win in November, but it is a district that's over 60% white. It's a wealthy district. It doesn't necessarily, I think what raises the question to me is, when you look at the movement that's going on around the country right now, you see a lot of white people, you see a lot of black people, you see a lot of brown people. Do you think that your win in this primary reflects this moment that we're in society right now?
I think it does. This is a district that, as you noted, is an affluent district, right? It's the 19th most affluent congressional district in the United States of America. But it is also, as I have said repeatedly on the stump, a tale of two cities, right? So the average household income in my district is approximately $100,000. But as the New York Times said in its endorsement of my campaign a few weeks ago, there are pockets of deep poverty, like where I grew up in the village of Spring Valley in Rockland County. We are no stranger to ice raids all throughout our district, and we are familiar with the devastating impacts of climate change, especially in our river towns, which flood whenever it rains. And so we've got a lot of problems here, and I think it is really the latest step for progress in the progressive movement for me to now be running to represent Bill and Hillary Clinton and also Andrew Cuomo in my district. We can do well in the suburbs, even as we compete successfully in places like New York City.
So I've been interested in reading some of your speeches over the course of the campaign, kind of the politics is personal, the lived experiences, bringing that to Capitol Hill. I've covered Congress for the last decade plus, and you see the members that have those often contribute more, or maybe more viscerally to some of the debates that they have because they've lived it. Is that kind of how you view your perspective if and when you get to Capitol Hill?
Absolutely. I don't think it's any coincidence that I was the only candidate in a crowded 8-way Democratic primary talking about criminal justice and policing reform before the murder of George Floyd. And I also don't think it's any coincidence that the only reason we're talking about a Green New Deal is because voters in New York's 14th congressional district elevated a 28-year-old bartender who has a stake in the future of the planet to the halls of power in Congress. And so I do think that our policy making is informed by our lived experiences and that we get better policy outcomes when we have more people in office for whom policy is personal.
So This is what I'm interested in. You mentioned a certain bartender from who you may be part of her delegation here in a couple of months. Progressive have a voice, and I think clearly have more of a voice in the Democratic caucus in the House than they've ever had before. But they are still, I don't think, a majority. They haven't won every single debate. Do you feel like you can change that if you win your election and get to Capitol Hill in January 2021?
You know, progress is often incremental. And one thing that I'm really pleased by is that public opinion shows that any number of progressive policy proposals are largely popular with the American people. Today, in the midst of a global pandemic, Medicare for All enjoys support from a majority of the American people. And so I think you're going to see increasingly members of the House Democratic Caucus who had been holding out on any number of issues move to the left. I think you'll see, and have already seen, Vice President Biden move to the left. And I'm excited about the progress that we're going to achieve together on behalf of the American people, because these are things that really are not Democratic or Republican issues. I mean, these should be issues that are American issues. Quality, affordable housing, health care for everyone in the richest nation in the history of the world, relief from crippling student debt so that we can liberate an entire generation of young people to meaningfully participate in this economy. And of course, perhaps most of all, saving the planet from climate catastrophe.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to have you in the hallways, assuming you win in November. And as I told you during the commercial, when I come up to you and ask you questions, you can't run away from me, okay? Because I'm going to have a recorder, I'm going to have a camera, I'm going to try and corner you in a hallway. I'm going to ask you the tough ones, all right, sir?
I believe in transparency in government, so I'll be right there.
That sounds great. Mondaire Jones, thank you very much for your time, for joining us on this holiday weekend. And
all right, my royal family. So, we had a chance.
Joining me now, the mayor of Miami Beach, Dan
Take
Gelber.
this
Mayor
down.
Gelber, earlier this week, you said that people are not listening, residents are not listening, in part.
All right, my royal family. So we had a chance to hear his lies. And this title of this article says it all. He won the seat. And now this picture was taken July 2nd, 2020. And he's basically saying he'll be friends to Israel. You see what I'm saying? All that other shit, my royal family, on that interview, he sounds like the typical politician. He didn't even answer one damn question. He just threw out a bunch of word salad like they always do. Ain't nothing new with these people. He is totally compromised. It don't matter if he grew up in the hood. You know, his mama was a single parent. But he done worked his way so-called up, and he has demonstrated from day one that he gonna be locked in step with the enemy. See, this is one of the enemy's supporters that I talk about often, my royal family. And like I said, did you hear him say anything about reparations or anything like that? No, not at all. So when he go up there, they gonna run it down. No, trust and believe, she gonna run it down to him. What he's supposed to do, lock in step. Even put it in writing and tell him he better follow it verbatim. So my royal family, let's listen to this long video. Then I have a little short snippet of a bonus video that I'm going to present to the royal family.
As Americans vote to choose their representatives in Washington, it's important to ask the question, who do these candidates really represent? Do they have Americans' best interest in mind? Or perhaps those of another nation?
What the lobby is all about is to make sure that Israel gets special treatment from the United States forever.
We try and go through student government and pass bills. I mean, you know, looking back on it now, it's all It's total crap. Yes, in general, obviously. But also, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't do anything. I mean, fighting back against it has no practical effect. What has a practical effect is getting Congress to give Israel military aid. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens at the University of X. What matters is what happens here. What matters is what happens in the capitals of the state, the capitals of the country. Does the war of ideas matter? I don't know. I know that getting $38 billion in security aid to Israel matters, which is what AIPAC is doing. That's what I'm proud to be and have been a part of for so long. My job was basically to convince students that participating in the war of ideas on campus is actually a distraction. You can hold up signs and have rallies on campus, but the Congress gets $3.1 billion a year for Israel. Everything AIPAC does is focused on influencing Congress. Congress is where you have leverage, so you can't influence the President of the United States directly, but the Congress can.
AIPAC is very interested in making sure that every representative and every senator toes the line on Israel. And it is highly effective in that regard. That's why it's considered to be synonymous in many people's heads with the lobby.
AIPAC's website shows members of Congress attending its conferences and declaring their support for Israel.
And on behalf of Congress, thank you for sending a clear and unequivocal message to the world that the United States stands with Israel now, tomorrow, and always.
I reject the BDS movement, whether it be on campuses in France and London or right here in the United States of America.
To get elected in the American political system, you need lots of money. What AIPAC does is it makes sure that money is funneled your way if you're seen as pro-Israel, and it'll go to significant lengths to make sure that you stay in office if you continue to be staunchly pro-Israel.
May God bless Israel. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
They have questionnaires. Anybody running for Congress is expected to fill out a questionnaire. And they evaluate the depth of your commitment to Israel on the basis of that questionnaire. Then you have an interview with local people. If you get AIPAC support, then more often than not, you're going to win.
Jim Moran is a Democrat who represented a congressional district in Northern Virginia.
You realize it's not just the money, it's the number of concerned activists. They'll send out postcards, they'll make phone calls, they'll organize. And that's the democratic process. They understand the democratic process.
We made sure that there were people in every single congressional district. And then you'd call them up and say, I'm calling from AIPAC in Washington. I did these calls. We hear that you're good friends with Congressman so-and-so. Oh, my God, yes. We've been friends since elementary school. Well, what does he think about Israel? I never talked to him about Israel. Well, can I come down and talk to you and help you figure out a way to talk to him about Israel? No, just tell me. What should I say? I don't have to. I'll just tell him.
Our undercover reporter wanted to learn more about how funding is secured for congressmen.
Speaking of the devil,
David Oakes, a prominent pro-Israel advocate, invited Tony to a fundraising event. Oakes later called him to discuss the details.
Is it just a social event?
No, hold on. I'm going to email you a list of the people that this group supports. This is the biggest ad hoc political group, and that's the wealthiest in D.C. Hold on. Mark Kirk, senator from Illinois. Ted Deutsch from Florida. Barbara Comstock, she's the congressman from Virginia. Richard Byrd from Carolina. Kelly Ayotte, she's fantastic. She's in the Arms Committee. They'll walk in the room and they'll say everything here is off the record. And then they'll say, here's a little bit about me, and then people will ask very specific questions.
The fundraiser was being held in a wealthy suburb of Washington.
The AIPAC group, it makes a difference. It really
current contribution limit from any person to a candidate is $2,700. Now that's a lot of money, you know, and that can certainly buy some gratitude with the lawmaker. But if you really want to add punch to that type of buying of favors, what you do is you get 50 or 100 people together at an event like this, all chipping in $2,700, and then you bundle it all together and hand over the total amount to the lawmaker. At that point, we're talking anywhere up to $250,000. So suddenly you've got a group of people with the same demand they want from the lawmaker handing over $250,000. That buys a lawmaker.
The fundraiser was for Anthony Brown, who ran for Congress in November 2016.
This is direct spending. Brown's going to use that 30 grand to do ad campaigns. So he strategically picked the ones who are in close reach they want to build relationships with. So we want the Jewish community to go face to face in a small environment, 30, 40 people, and say, this is what's important to us. We want to make sure we give you money that you're going to enforce the Iran deal. That way, when they need something from him or her, like the Iran deal, they can quickly mobilize and say, look, we'll give you 30 grand. They actually impact it.
He's actually saying we're buying these office holders. And that's the point. We're chipping in all this money so we can hand over $100,000 or $200,000 to the office holders so we can buy them.
You're not supposed to advertise. There's only the advertising law. I'm surprised they had an invite. I've never seen an actual invite before.
Oakes described a similar event he attended in New York, which included donors from Wall Street.
In New York, with Jeff Talbot, we don't ask a goddamn thing about health issues. You know why? Because it's a tiny issue, that's why. It's a small, insignificant issue. The big issue is Iran. We want everything focused on Iran. What happens is Jeff meets the congressman in the back room, tells them exactly what his goals are. And by the way, Jeff Talbot is worth $250 million. Basically, they hand him an envelope with 20 credit cards and say, you can swipe each of these credit cards for $1,000 each.
There is a disclosure law that is designed to highlight whether there may be potential money laundering going on in events like this. And that is if the funds are earmarked. And that means the organization has to disclose who showed up at that event and how much each individual chipped in and what they handed over to the lawmaker.
What's the name of the group that puts this on?
It doesn't have a name. There's no name. It's an ad hoc political group. For all the legal reasons, people pool their money.
What this specific group is doing to try to avoid that disclosure requirement, it isn't taking money and then putting it in its own account and then handing it over to the office holder. It's just collecting credit card information and then turning that over directly to the candidate. Therefore, it's not violating the earmarking law, and they're not reporting this. And so each individual is subject to that $2,700 limit. And if any individual goes over that limit, they are violating the contribution limit. They cannot legally do that by laundering money through other individuals.
If you give $5,000, Jeff will ensure that I don't go over the $2,600. You know what I'm saying?
A relatively small number of families supply hundreds of millions of dollars annually to lobby politicians. One of the most effective uses of the lobby's funds occurs when Congress is on its break.
Every year, they fly hundreds of members of Congress to Israel for these extended travel junkets that are really lavish. They're first-rate vacations. They'll rack up $20,000 or more for a vacation for a member of Congress. The member can bring along their spouse, and they have a great time.
An attempt was made to change the law so that all expenses-paid trips would be considered a bribe.
I drafted legislation to try to reform the whole profession of lobbying to get rid of free travel and gifts from lobbyists. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 significantly enhance the travel restrictions that if you're an organization that employs a lobbyist, you can only provide a one-day trip for a member of Congress.
Then AIPAC exerted its influence.
There was a major loophole written into the travel restriction that was essentially engineered by AIPAC, and this loophole is widely known as the AIPAC loophole.
The clause excluded educational trips organized by a charity that didn't hire lobbyists. AIPAC happened to be affiliated to such a charity.
It doesn't have an office, it doesn't have any employees, it's just a tax form that they filed. Gifts of dinner, gifts of wonderful resorts to stay at, gifts of entertainment, all of which is packed up into one of these trips, is a very, very effective tool at influence peddling.
The money raised by AIPAC doesn't just fund congressmen who support their goals.
If you wander off the reservation and you become critical of Israel, you not only will not get money, AIPAC will go to great lengths to find somebody to run against you and support that person very generously. And the end result is you're likely to lose your seat in Congress.
They threaten. They immediately threaten. Even if they know that AIPAC can't defeat them, AIPAC can make their lives more difficult. They can make sure that their next town meeting or something, some members of the Jewish congregation jump up and say, but you're anti-Israel.
In 2002, AIPAC was lobbying Moran to vote for the invasion of Iraq.
The executive director of AIPAC said that his most important accomplishment was securing the authorization for the use of U.S. military force in Iraq. AIPAC was pushing it very hard.
Why does AIPAC benefit from the United States going to war?
The United States getting involved in wars in the Middle East is ultimately in Israel's interest, because we have a stake in the region.
Congressman Moran refused to vote for the invasion, as AIPAC requested.
There are compelling, fundamental reasons why this body should oppose this resolution.
Then at a public meeting, he was asked a question.
A Jewish woman actually stood up in the town hall. She said, why aren't more Jews involved in the marches against the war? I said, if the leaders of the Jewish community were opposed to the war, I think that would make a difference.
The lobby reacted, claiming this was evidence of Moran's belief in a Jewish conspiracy that was leading America to war.
There was a conservative rabbi in my district who was assigned to me, I assume, by AIPAC. And he had warned me that if I voiced my views about the Israeli lobby, that my career would be over, and implied that it would be done through the Post. And sure enough, the Washington Post editorialized brutally. Everybody ganged up.
So what are the main outlets that TIP work with?
Washington Post is the biggest one.
Okay. Isn't that like just down there or something?
Yeah, it's actually that building.
Moran claims the Washington Post's editorial board has a close relationship with AIPAC.
The principal editorial board of the Post itself has been a very effective instrument because they've been able to maintain their credibility, and it's a great paper in every other way, but because they have such credibility, they're extremely effective.
Everyone knew he wasn't anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism has come to mean anti-Israel. The AIPAC crowd doesn't really care very much about whether or not a person likes Jews or wants one to move next door. All they care about is what their position is on Israel.
Both of my daughters married Jewish men. My grandchildren are Jewish. Anybody that considers me anti-Semite is ignorant.
And there's no more special interest that has any more influence than the pro-Israel lobby. Well, every candidate for Congress at that time had a pledge. They were given a pledge to sign. And I was new on the scene, And so the pledge had Jerusalem as the capital city, the military superiority of Israel.
American Congress people have to sign this pledge.
Yes, you sign the pledge. If you don't sign the pledge, you don't get money. So, for example, it was almost like water torture for me. My parents observed this. I would get a call, and the person on the other end of the phone would say, I want to do a fundraiser for you. And then we would get into the planning. I would get really excited because, of course, you have to have money in order to run a campaign. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the planning, they would say, did you sign the pledge? And then I would say, no, I didn't sign the pledge. And then my fundraiser would go kaput.
So, well, I just want to get into this pledge a little bit more. So this is basically something that is mandatory, that every congressperson has to sign, saying that, what, Jerusalem, you said, is the capital of Israel, and what else?
You make a commitment that you will vote to support the military superiority of Israel, that the economic assistance that Israel wants, that you would vote to provide that.
This isn't a question for the Congress people serving, that they are representing, or they're supposed to be representing, the people of the United States, not a foreign country, and yet they have to pledge allegiance to a foreign state.
That's what
no one questions this.
That's what I was asked to do. And I made it public. This probably nobody had said anything about it, but I made it public, and then, you know, the excuse was, well, you know, those were just overzealous advocates for Israel. So then the tactic changed, and but this is what is done for 535 members of the United States Congress. 100 senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives have to now write a paragraph, which basically says the same thing. So it's not a pledge, but it's a paragraph, and you post it, and, you know, there are these forums you have to go to at the synagogues or whatever. And then, you know, if you don't perform appropriately, then you don't get money to run your campaign. The problem is that it requires an awful lot of money to run a campaign.
I am convinced that it constitutes a danger for all America and threatens to rip the fabric of our democracy. Says the emergence of a network of pro-Israel PACs as an important source of campaign funds for federal candidates has become an issue of intense controversy, even among American Jews who want to promote Israel's security but don't want to be perceived as being driven by a single issue. I didn't say that, that's what this book said. There was little doubt that contribution decisions are centralized either through a formal or informal arrangement, and then it proceeds to list these pro-Israel PACs. It says it is well documented that many of the pro-Israel PACs were created with AIPAC's encouragement.
One would think that given the terrible brutality that is visited every day of the year against the poor Palestinians in the occupied territory, that the American congressmen, the American senators would be lined up 50 deep every day in their chambers to speak with outrage and anguish about what was going on in the occupied territory. But you can search the congressional record, which prints every word that is said in both chambers of the Congress, and not find one word of criticism of Israel for its behavior. In a nutshell, it is because the American congressmen are afraid of the power of Israel's lobby. They are convinced that if they challenge the lobby, they will pay a price next election day, and politics is survival. They all want to be reelected.
See how your candidates score on the Israel-Palestine issue and find out how much money they've been given by the pro-Israel lobby. Check out the congressional scoreboards at IsraelPalestineNews.org by clicking the link in the description below.
Okay, my royal family. So, we really get to see how the enemy operates and how those imposters, those very imposters that stole everything from us, and how they bully America, and how they have set it up that even the descendants of Jews receive reparations. I mean, this is quite atrocious. It pisses me off. 7,000 per minute. And I had said that this country could give every man, woman, and child $10,000 a month from here on out, and they still won't be broke. And they are demonstrating that the enormous amount of money that they are giving to Israel, and then all the atrocious things that they do to how they military get down over there. So let's listen to this quick bonus video. And this is, again, Nita Lowry. Want to hear what comes out of the horse's mouth.
You know, it was a difficult thing. When I was elected head of the Appropriations Committee, obviously you're the boss. I can choose any subcommittee I want. And there's the Labor, Health, Human Service, Education Subcommittee, which funds education, health care, child care, after school programs, all the things that I've been working on for a long time, $150 billion bill. And I said, do I take that and be the chair, or take the $55 billion bill that funds foreign operations, including the money for Israel? My heart came first. And this is why I've been the chair all these years for the committee that funds all the money we give to Israel. Some may say it's not enough. I said whatever we give is what it is. And obviously we continue to fund so many of the programs that affect Israel and the Israel-United States relationship and our Jewish community here in the United States. So for me, it has really been an honor to be on the front line, because someone comes to you with a problem and immediately I say, okay, let's do something about it.
All right. Now you hear what this old ass hag did with our tax-paying dollars. The decisions that she made, and the American people voted her raggedy ass in office. And this is who is going to replace her. And not a damn thing is going to change. All that shit he talking is straight ass bullshit. But let's not lose sight of Cynthia McKinley and the things that she said, how they got down, because, you know, she rejected everything up there when she entered basically a cesspool. I mean, this has to be reported, because I just reported about I put a special spotlight on Florida, and they receiving pennies down there, and some not even pennies. Some folks ain't receiving anything at all. But this is going all this stuff is going through the United States, because when I was doing my deeper research, they quietly slipped that in. They know they wrong. See, when people get down like that and smile in your face, our Father don't like that. They got a special place in hell for people like this to continue to do this stuff. And they have allowed these imposters to bully them, that they're going to receive more foreign aid than anyone. No. very little foreign aid. You make your own country operate. I found out and didn't even notice that they have abundance of diamonds over there in Israel. So mind your damn diamonds. Well, they ain't even theirs either. That's our shit too. Why you ain't doing that? What are they offering? That's the question that I want to ask. What the fuck is they offering to this country? That is our money. And then these people want to play games with our reparations, want to just have, want to sit down and just talk about it to nausea. To nausea. That's why we are watching America kingdom fall and implode on thyself, because they keep doing the same repetitive shit. I remember a long time ago, Farrakhan said, oh, America has a way out, but she ain't gonna take it. No. They have already spoke volumes how they gonna get down in this country. This is quite atrocious, quite disgusting, and folks are bleeding over here. And they didn't deliberately put glitches in the system where people can't receive a penny. And then you got the nerves to want to reduce. Now you got to remember, in Florida, they get $245 a week in unemployment. And then they want to take the unemployment and be $200 a week. $600 ain't even enough. $1,000 ain't even enough. $2,000 ain't even enough. Over there in Germany, they receiving $5,000 a month. And it goes right back into the economy. So they asshole backwards. And then what gets me is these politicians get these so-called free trips over to Israel to go to some fancy resort. And in their warped mind, oh, I'm getting this for free. No, all they did was went into the very funds that you approved and do some feel-good shit where you take your family on a vacation. So that was already paid for by the taxpayers too. Oh, my royal family, I can go on and on and on all damn day. $19 million a day. 7,000 per minute. Put that on your frontal lobe. So, my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.